What's up and welcome to another episode of the Scott and Ian Show on the SBL podcast. Today, we're diving into some very intriguing questions. Number one, what if it isn't a Fender? Are there some other alternatives? Talk about some other basses. We're going to talk about some things that maybe look like Fenders but aren't, why you would even want that. Prompted by a number of questions that I've got that was like, hey, Fender is the ubiquitous thing. What else is there? Are there other options out there? We're going to explore that. I am also going to confront Mr. Scott Devine about why seemingly he has abandoned the P bass. I know it's a strong word, but it's true. And we're also going to talk about how technique may just be at the root of everything. You have a problem executing something on your instrument, maybe it's about technique. You have a problem grooving on that thing, maybe it's not that your internal time feel sucks, maybe it's that you're having a problem with the actual execution. That is something that Scott is so into, is this idea that so many things can be boiled down to your technique or lack of it. We're going to talk a lot about that too. But before we get to it, let me tell you what's going on at SBL this week. We have a mentor session coming up on Monday with yours truly. I'm going to continue the series of best bass lines. That was going to be a combination of greatest and best and came out best. Greatest, best bass lines of all time, A to Z, and we're on M. So if you have some suggestions for me, I think I know what I'm going to do. But if you have some suggestions for me, hit me up on the campus or hit me up on Instagram at Ian Martin Allison and let me know what you'd like me to do for that. That is part of our mentors program that we do every single Monday. We have different teachers in doing live streams for you. You get to join and hang out and engage in the chat and be a part of the live stream, really inform how it goes. So if you want direct access to players, to educators, to bass players, this is the place to get it at SBL. You haven't taken the free 14-day trial? What are you doing? Get out there, check it out, scottsbasslessons.com. That's enough of me. Let's get into it. Okay, hold on. How long have you only been eating meat?
Wait a minute, what day is it today?
Yeah, what day is it today?
Thursday, isn't it? Monday, Tuesday,
yeah.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Monday. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Hang on. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday,
get those
Monday,
digits
Tuesday,
out. I count on my fingers too.
11 days.
11 days, dude. All right, hold up. I've
11
never
days
done
of meat only.
I've never done the carnivore diet. Just imagine you like a Wampa ice creature, dude. Do you get that reference? Empire Strikes Back. Just like you know, devouring beasts. But that's probably not that. It's probably something like
chicken breast, dude. Chicken breast. So I'm doing intermittent fasting. Yeah, so I'm not eating till 12 o'clock. I have a 6-hour window to eat basically every day. So
yeah,
for a 6-hour window I can eat, and then 18 hours or whatever it is off.
Right.
So not eating for that amount of time. And then during that time, so these are two different kind of sort of like approaches. And during that time, I'm just eating meat. So that's no fruit, that's nothing, and I'm only drinking water. And I feel great, actually. I've been doing it for 11 days. I'm going to take it to 30 days. And if anybody's wondering what the hell I am doing, it is because I suffer from like inflammation, and get really, without going down a rabbit hole, I have suffered from kind of sort of like stomach related issues since I was like mid-20s until I was probably mid-30s, when I sort of like figured out that I could control this stuff with diet. So a good 10, maybe more years, I had issues with digestion in my stomach and like massive bloating and stuff like that.
Candida, right?
Oh, I got that Candida infection, all of that stuff, yeah. And it was all...
That's because all that beans on toast, dude.
It's all that beans on toast.
Crisps and chocolates and beans on toast. Jesus.
It is, man. And and then and from that, and from like, you know, messing around with my diet, I found out that I can control the inflammation in my body. And I do have like inflammatory issues, like I get really achy joints, obviously, which is inflammation. And I went to the doctors, and they were like, "Oh, whatever, blah blah blah." You know, it must be like early onset and sort of like arthritis and all this kind of shit, right?
Wow.
And it actually was none of that. It was none of that. It was just inflammation that was diet related. So when things flare up, I just tend to go on a really strict diet of some kind. And I've experimented with like lots of different types of diet in the past. And the one that seems to work the best for me is the carnivore diet. And I found out about it listening to a Joe Rogan episode where he was interviewing Jordan Peterson's daughter, and who's had a really interesting journey with a lot of autoimmune disorder and inflammatory issues for years, and found out that when she goes on a carnivore diet, it really gets rid of all inflammation, autoimmune issues that she's having. And I was like, oh shit, I'll give that a go. And for me, for my body type, whatever, I know that people, you know, everybody's different. For my body type, it's absolutely fantastic. And honestly, I wish it was sustainable for me. Maybe I'll do a better job of it. But I sometimes slide hard off the wagon and just like, like crisps and whatever. And I've got kids eating all of that juicy kid food as well, and I'm like, give me that stuff. Let's go to the fish and chip shop.
I know.
When I'm on this diet, I feel like super powered, and I think what happens is I get used to it, forget about it, and then slide off, and then it gets to the point where I'm like, I'll go back on, and then when I go back on, I'm like, holy shit, I'm super powered again. My stomach feels amazing. Like I've had no. Just nothing for this entire time. I've got no aches and pains. I feel like just like mad awake, like crazy energy. I've been waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning and going for an hour walk. Like normally I wake up at like, I don't know, like after 7 o'clock, and I feel like I'm dying. You know, I'm like, oh. Like for the last more than a week, I've been bouncing out of bed at 6 o'clock in the morning. I've been like hour walk and then back and waking up the kids and sitting and watching The Hobbit and all Lord of the Rings and whatever. You know, that's another story. But that's been a trip. But yeah,
wow.
So I love it. Love it.
Ask me if I'm still doing the one meal a day.
Were you down to one meal a day?
Yeah, remember when I told you about the Chipotle diet?
Yeah, I can remember that. Yeah, I thought it was 2 meals a day. Was it 1 meal a day?
One, yeah.
So intermittent. So basically, really intense intermittent fasting.
Yeah, I just was essentially eating lunch, like a giant lunch.
And then how did you feel when you were doing it?
Good, actually really good. And then I came over to the UK and I was like, I'm not going to subject anyone else to that. And then, and so that got me out of it. And then, okay, I'm going to go to Montana to see my dad, and I'm not going to do that and so I'm back. And I'm trying to do it again, but have I been successful? No.
Have you just been thinking about doing it?
Dude,
and just haven't done it yet? You haven't pulled the trigger.
To do it right, and then what happened? You know me. That late night hours.
No. Have you started that again?
Well, yeah, man. That's a beast to break. It is a beast. And if I feel it's like an addiction. Eating late for me, it's an addiction. And when I'm doing the one meal a day and really on it, I'm good. But last night, oh man, there was a couple of tasty morsels in the fridge calling my name, dude.
So do you think it's
calling my name?
So it's actually not to do with. It's actually just the snacks, isn't it? It's not to do with the 1 meal a day.
Yeah.
So for instance, if I said, "Hey, why don't you just have 2 meals a day?" That's still not going to make a difference, is it? It's just the snacks.
Not at all.
It's
4 meals a day. Yeah.
You'd still want the snacks. Yeah, it's the snacks.
I'd still want the snacks. Yes. So it's a problem, and I'm working to solve it. But it's hard, man. It's a struggle. So, like there was a podcast episode, I think, where I was like, oh, yeah, I'm doing it. And I'm feeling great. Like you are right now. I'm listening to you be like, oh, yeah, just chicken breasts and water. And I'm feeling great, doing all the walks, getting all the productivity done. And then I'm just feeling like a sack of shit over here. So listen, anybody listening to the podcast, if you're feeling like I'm feeling, it's all good. There's still time. You can change your ways. You don't have to just eat chicken breasts and water. Although I may I might give that a try. Here's the thing, though.
Hot sauce is the key, dude. Just chicken breast with hot sauce.
Oh yeah, but the trick is you got to prep. So you got to make that chicken. I wonder.
I'm not eating high class chicken, dude.
You're not eating chicken breast that you cook, or you
banging
like
these
pre-cooked?
things. Pre-cooked. Yeah, banging them in the microwave. Hey, there's room for improvement. I'm just at step one. I'm at step one. If I was like, I'm going to get raw farm fed grass, sort of like chickens, and it'd be too hard. It'd be too hard. Right. So for right now, I'm just trying to do the diet, like this initial step, and then we'll see where it goes from that. But I'm still loving it. I'm loving it. The prep,
incredible.
The prep is 2 minutes.
The prep is easy. Okay.
In and on. Yeah, in and on.
In and on. In and on and out.
Just to bring this back to bass playing, though, like a lot of people ask me about playing injuries and things surrounding them. And at no point does anybody think about inflammation and diet and how that affects your body when you're playing. And I think that it's probably a much bigger thing than people realize.
Absolutely.
Especially when it comes to like injuries, tendon injuries, talking to the musician friends that I have, and other friends outside of music, my suspicion is that there are a lot of people suffering from inflammation and they don't really know it. And when you go to a general GP, sorry, I'm just going to, broad brush statements here. So if there are any great doctors listening to this podcast, I do apologize. But no doctor I have ever gone to has actually mentioned diet to me, ever.
Right.
Hey, what are you eating? Which to me is just outlandish. And
it is odd.
And any of my friends that have had medical issues that have that I believe might have stemmed from diet, when I ask them, hey, has the doctor talked to you about your diet? And they're like, no. And I'm like, yeah, well, same here. And then I tell them, hey, you should try this stuff out.
It's only diet related when there becomes an issue. Like if you're diagnosed with diabetes, type 2 diabetes, then the diet issue comes up, right? Then it's like, oh, well, okay, here's the problem. And now you can mitigate this with diet. But it seems like it doesn't come up until there's a big diagnosis, and there's probably an insurance reason why. now we're getting into like murky waters, but I have noticed that too. I went to see a general doctor. I don't either, actually. I'm just talking out of my ass, which I tend to do. But yeah, man, I remember seeing a doc who, and I mentioned something about sugar. And about like, man, I feel when I'm eating sugar, I have all these skin issues and I have this and that. And they chose this language very carefully. They said, it's possible, this doctor said to me, it's possible that there are some benefits to reducing your sugar intake.
Yeah, such a weird. Okay,
that's very calculated. It's very, it's like, it was very like, I don't know. I'm just saying. It was kind of that, who knows, but and anyway, I do definitely feel better when I'm not eating sugar and gluten, man.
Oh, big time. Sugar kicks my ass. I went on a 7-month sugar-free diet once. That was it was amazing. It was amazing. It was sugar-free, gluten-free for 7 months. That kicked my ass. That was really hard to do. I used to have sort of like, not panic attacks, but sort of like, if you were out, if I was out, like I'd go on a walk or something like that with the dogs, and I'd be like 30, 40 miles away from home, and I had a long drive back, and then I was hungry and I hadn't taken anything to eat. Finding something on the way back that doesn't
impossible.
Oh, and I wasn't eating fruit as well at the time either. So, and that was by choice, by the way, because I was cutting all sugar. So finding anything on shops that doesn't have any sugar in and no gluten, no fruit, it is so hard. It's like, dude, crazy.
Also, in the UK, it's especially hard.
It's harder in the UK. In the US, man. I went to LA and I was like, everything's sort of like health food this and health food that. It's like salads. The full thing. Salads. And like, if you guys have, if you're like, obviously we do salads in the UK, right? But it was much more kind of like dialed in. But in the UK, you've got like, basically like a small part of an aisle in a supermarket that's sort of like gluten free, like a block of stuff. Here's your gluten free section.
It's very little. Yeah, I've noticed that too. I remember, Gav talking about like the sugar tax, and because Americans are such monsters, and I'm like, but hold on, dude. like the UK, it is just, I feel like it's just like chocolate and crisps. The end. And I know that that's not true, but man, oh man, it feels like that sometimes when I go into the shops. It's like, oh, I guess you get a Mars bar and you get a pack of crisps, but that's probably because I'm the idiot and not the shop. I know there's other options.
There's like, it's set out in the UK. It's set out in a certain way that when you walk down the aisle, you're basically like walking down an aisle of sugar and chocolate on the way to the checkout. Like it's purposefully built like that, so they can get all of the same in the US. All the juice and the squeeze.
Yeah, it's the same here, but there are definitely more sort of like healthy options presented. I think you're like, oh. And then I still choose the chocolate and crisp. So anyway, God.
You still hit the snacks. Anyway, dude, let's talk about bass. Let's talk about bass. What we talk about? What's first on the docket? What's the I'm looking at it now, dude. This is a killer topic to get into. And if anybody's not been around the podcast for a while, what we've been doing recently is splitting up the podcast into various topics. To make it more interesting for you. And the first one on the docket today, which is down to Mr. Ian Allison here, is what's the best option to consider that isn't Fender? So when you ask that question, Ian, do you mean like if you want a Fender sound, what is the best option? Is that the vibe? Yeah.
Great question. We could answer it that way. I think I should have written down who this came from. So if you're out there, someone wrote this to me, I think on Instagram, and I thought, oh, that's a really fun question to consider. So I'm sorry I don't have your name, but let me know and I'll give you credit in another episode. But that question is more, to me, just felt very broad. I think it's this idea of like Fender is the ubiquitous choice. What bass should I get? Oh, you should get a P bass. What bass should I get? Oh, you should get a jazz bass. That's the deal, right? Always, almost.
Yeah.
But there are so many other options, but yet it always seems to kind of come back to those two things. If the chips are down, if you really, what's the professional thing that you should get? Well, you should probably get a P bass, a jazz bass, maybe both. Yeah. But what are the best options to consider that aren't Fender? And I like the way you want to answer it. And Scott also put like a low, mid, and high price range on it as well.
We could do both. We can do both. We could run. So should we run through first of all, if you want a Fender, but you don't want to, for whatever reason, like what are the Fender alternatives? You like the Fender sound. And when I say the Fender sound, let me just be obvious. When I say the Fender sound, I actually mean like a jazz bass.
A jazz bass?
Yeah, that's what jumps to me. Yeah, whatever, dude. What? I'm kidding. Yeah, P bass, Shmee bass.
Fall off my chair.
I know. Yeah. But for me, like when I say the Fender, the instant thing that comes to mind to me is that sort of like jazz bass sound. But let's do both. Because there are manufacturers that make basses in the low, mid, and high price range that kind of specialize in building Fenders that aren't a Fender. So that jazz bass and P bass kind of vibe.
And I'm just going to say this before we move on. I'm coming back. We're circling back around to this whatever P bass thing because my man across the pond has put the P bass to rest. We're coming back to that, dude. Oh, you're not off the freaking hook, dude. You're not off the hook. We're coming back. But before we do, all right.
I'm ready.
So yeah, okay. If you want, that's cool. If you want a Fender thing, but you don't want the headstock to say Fender, why wouldn't you want the headstock to say Fender? Because budget? Because
I think, sometimes budget. Yeah. So for the low, you could go Squire. They do some great. They do some great.
Sure.
Great basses and stuff like that, but there are more options out there. The one that jumps to mind for me, rightly or wrongly, would be Sire. I think Sire are making some fantastic basses, and you can get a Fender that is the same price as a Sire through my experience, the basses I've played, I would probably gravitate towards Sire over Fender in that price bracket.
Got it. Why?
Feel and sound, just the feel. It feels just a bit nicer, and it just sounds great. They just sound, and actually, for sure, all of the Sires that I've played have had better setups.
Yes, right.
Yeah, they're set up great. They generally come set up really great out of the box, and that's not common for a bass in that price category. How much Sires? Like we should be really clear what the price range is here, right? So Sire jazz bass. Because they've probably got a couple of different models. So
I think I think you can pay a bunch of money for one, but they have some that start out certainly under 1,000. But are there any that are under like 500?
Yeah, there are. Yeah, I'm just having a look now. Yeah, so in the UK, so this is pounds, like around £700. There's some around £600.
It's still going to be under $1,000.
There's some that are £500.
Yeah,
and then they do go above, but they play great.
Yeah,
they do play great.
But maybe be more of like a mid category. Let me ask you this: there have been a lot of people that have been talking about. I'm going to screw it up. Benton is the last word. I want to say, is it Harley or Harvey?
Is it? Let me have a look. Let's have a look.
Because that was a brand that I had never considered. And I think
Harley with an L. Harley. Yeah.
Harley Benton.
Yeah.
There have been a bunch of people that have been playing those recently saying, oh, there's some really good stuff coming out of that brand. And I don't have any experience with that brand. But
no, me neither, no.
But that would be interesting to try one and see. And obviously, if you can get out into a store and check this stuff out, we did the episode about reverb sucks. Hey, P.S. Scott Devine, there were some people that were pissed about that episode.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they
did
were
they
like,
listen to it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, yes, but they said you made it about the whole experience of buying online, but you made reverb the dog that got kicked, or the punching bag.
Basically, we were like, fast foods. No, why McDonald's sucks.
Yeah, and then we were like, well, it's actually
we were like,
food.
Fast food sucks.
Yeah, and it's like it's
give us a break, dudes. Give us a break.
But it's an easy target. It's an easy target to say reverb, right? And in a way, too, I was thinking about this for this episode. I was thinking, what if you were a rep at Fender? What if you worked at Fender and it's like, another podcast giving Fender a kicking, what are the things to consider other than Fender?
Oh, I actually like Fender.
Dude, I mean, same. Of course, I know you do, and I do too. I think in a way, it's actually like to include the big brand. Why reverb sucks? Okay. Why, what should you consider other than Fender? In a way, it props up the brand as the mega, as the uncontested, or the, not uncontested. What's the word I'm looking for? As the given, the no-brainer, right?
Yeah,
and in a way, if you were smart, I think, well, or, if you just chose to look at it a different way, you'd think, oh, actually, that's actually good for the brand. The brand name is everywhere. Reverb, Fender, right? So, yeah, we didn't mean to give reverb only a kicking, as Scott likes to say.
Hey, I freaking love reverb. I love reverb. I'm on that thing every freaking day. But buying basses online does suck because of, if you want to know why, go listen to that episode.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, reverb are the biggest one in the category. So we thought it was better just to sort of like, hey, and you clicked on it, right? So the title works. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, and Fender too. I love Fender, but I remember, did you have this when you were young, Scott, of like, you wanted to play anything but? Did you have that? Like anything but a Fender in the beginning, in the very beginning, did you? Because I thought too, like my dad bought a Sunburst Strat. And I love old Bob Allison. But when I was 13, the last thing I ever wanted to look at, play, hear was a frickin' Sunburst Strat. Barf.
Yeah, dude, I was like all about Ibanez, but I wasn't playing bass. I was playing guitar, but I was like a Steve Vai fan, wanted to play like Vai or Satriani or something like that. But
and then that trickles down into basses, right? Where you're like, I'm not going to play a P bass.
Oh, P bass. That was like the most uncool thing for me. But that was actually, it was more to do with the sound, I think. Maybe the look a little bit, but the sound, I just hated the sound of P basses when I hated.
I did too. I hated it.
Like you listen to Marcus Miller, you listen to like those stuff, like Victor Wooten, right? Then you listen to a P bass and you're like, because you just don't get it. Yeah, you just don't get it, right? So
you don't get it, yeah. Right.
But I think that, just to bring it up, I think that Fender are great, but I think that it's an interesting conversation to have about should it be a Fender that you buy, or are there different basses to consider in these different price brackets? So in that lower price bracket, if I was going to buy a Fender style instrument, would it be a Fender? Would it be something else? For me, I think for the low, I think Harley Benton, I've heard great things about them as well, so definitely check them out. It might be a Sire. Maybe I'd like to get in a shop and play some basses. If I could, that's probably what it would come down to. Getting into a shop, playing the basses, what actually plays best. I think in that low price bracket, some of them are dogs when it comes to setup. So I just want to get in and play the actual bass and see what it felt like.
Yes.
In the mid, certain low, I would imagine is like less than $1,000, right?
Yep.
And then, and then mid. What do you categorize high as?
Well, I actually, for low, would even wonder if people thinking like, oh, 1,000 sounds a little high for the low category. In the low, I would think like sub 600 bucks, maybe.
Yeah.
Mid is anywhere from, I don't know, 400 or 500 to 1,000, maybe. That could be mid. I don't know.
But then high is like, I would say high. Bear in mind, like how much is your IMA from low?
5,500.
Exactly right. So So high, I think that we just need to broaden them out a little bit. I think that high...
Maybe you're right. Yeah.
I think high is like 3,000 and above.
Okay.
Or 2,500 above. And then I think that there's that mid bracket is maybe, you're right, maybe like 800 to
2,000.
8 to 2.5 or something like that.
We're shooting from the hip today, guys.
We are shooting from in that mid bracket. I think that Fender have some great basses.
Of course.
I think they have some great basses.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're talking about jazz bass and P bass predominantly here. Is there any manufacturers that in that mid bracket, let's say 800 to 2,000, 2,500, any brands in that bracket that kind of jump out to you? I will say that Sire, their top end instruments are over 1,000. So they would be in that category. Any others that jump out?
Not that are jumping right out to me at the moment. That's terrible. There should be.
It's a weird price bracket though, right?
Yeah. I mean, Lakeland, I feel like in the early 2000s, Lakeland led that market with the Skyline basses.
Yeah.
Those, and they still make those, but I don't know what's going on at Lakeland. I feel like they have just disappeared out of the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
They still make them. But hopefully they'll be back. Come on, Lakeland. I would have said that 10 years ago.
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Skylines, yeah. They're great basses.
Skylines. Yeah, they are. Yeah. They are great basses. If you could
get them secondhand as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Definitely. And I know we're still just talking about like Fender styled things. And I also do want to talk about what are the alternatives to Fender, like Fender styled things also. Yeah. But I don't know, anything spring to mind for you in the mid?
Not really. I will say I would go, if I had that within that price bracket, 800 to 2,000, 2,500, I would go hard into the secondhand market. That's what I'd be looking at. I'd be like, can I get a, enter name here on like the $2,000? So for instance, I've seen some Nordstrands knocking around at like $2,000, $2,500. Mm-hmm. They are freaking outrageous basses.
Cool.
They're outrageous. So Kerry Nordstrand is a luthier. Obviously, many of you have heard of Nordstrand pickups. Well, he makes basses. He used to make basses like as his only thing, but then it went into pickups, and now he sometimes does a run of basses. If you can get a Nordstrand bass, like put it this way, if there was like a Fender, like that was about $2,000, $2,500, and a Nordstrand secondhand for about $2,500, I would take the Nordstrand every single day.
Would you really?
Forever.
Wow. I need to play one. I've never played one.
Yeah, they're killer.
Cool.
They're basically Sadowskis. They're like that. They're like full on, like uber. Like I would put them in a bracket along with like Lull, Sadowski, Oliva Capolo, Nordstrand. But because they're not as talked about now, people aren't as hot for them.
Do you remember there was a dude too that worked at Sadowski that had a shop for a while called Valenti?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Killer
Those basses were cool, and they weren't crazy money as well. I don't know if he's still making those.
I think he is, yeah. He was on Talk Bass for a while, wasn't he?
Yeah. I remember thinking about picking one of those up. Here's a question, though. In this mid, we're talking a lot about these sort of fancy Fenders, right? Because it seems like when people copy Fenders, they either do budget versions of the passive stuff, or they do these sort of race car-y, like if you think about Sadowski, like preamps, right? Roger Sadowski in New York putting preamps in Marcus, in everybody's basses. They do in these preamp super Fenders that are active. But is there anybody, there are a few manufacturers that come to mind that make like really killing recreations of Fenders that are passive, like, I'm thinking of maybe Bluesman Vintage. Do you know that company?
Yeah,
I'm thinking of, I suppose maybe Nash makes, But I've never personally been drawn to those companies because I feel like if you're going to just do the Fender thing, the passive classic Fender thing, why wouldn't you maybe just want a Fender?
Just get a Fender, yeah. Just get a Fender. Yeah.
Unless you want some kind of, either you want something super cheap or you're a nerd and want, all of these subtle upgrades that make you feel good on the band side, which is great. I mean, I like that vibe as well.
Yeah.
But people have asked me a lot actually about those sort of like, well, what about Nash? What about Bluesman or Bluesman? I don't know how to say it. And I'm always like, I would just rather have a Fender. If it were like just the dead on, like a bass that someone looks at and is like, oh, sick, Fender. Oh, the headstock logo is different. Everything else is the same.
Yeah.
I'm personally not super drawn to that style of thing, but yeah, those are the other ones I can think of, kind of in maybe the mid.
And you can get a great secondhand Fender as well. Like I'd probably buy a secondhand Fender over a new Fender in that price range because you're going to be able to get a really good one.
Top end bracket. Oliva.
There's there's some really interesting
Sadowski,
ones.
Some monsters.
Isn't it funny how we've just been waiting to get to this bracket, right? We're just like, let's go.
Who cares about all that stuff below?
Yeah. Well, and Nordstrand to a certain extent. So I would say Nordstrand, but you wouldn't be able to get a new one for in that mid bracket, but you could get a second-hand one made by Carey. But so the top ones, Oliva Capolo, which is Jimmy Capolo, Sadowski, Lull, Nordstrand, Lakeland.
Yeah.
Like the new ones, they're up there.
And the US Lakelands are incredible. Actually.
Yeah, the US ones, yeah. We're probably missing somebody out. Valenti might be up there as well. He might be into that price bracket. I think he probably is.
Okay.
They're different. I think that some of them are much more traditional. The obvious one would be Oliva, who are much more traditional. They've got nitro finish. He purposefully uses the same construction techniques or tries to stick as close to the construction techniques that Fender used as possible. But he does 5 strings, and he's kind of known for the 5 string. I think that when people talk about Jimmy Capolo, they say oh yeah, it's if you want a pre-CBS Fender but a 5-string version, Capolo's the place to go. It's that's I've heard that a lot, and I haven't played actually that many. I've got one myself, which is it's a killer bass. It's really amazing bass. It's a cool bass, isn't it? Yeah. And then you've got Sadowski, obviously, which do vintage stuff, but I don't necessarily. I think they've got more of a modern sound to them.
For sure.
I don't know. Yeah, you too. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And I owned one or maybe even two Sadowskis in my time, and they're so lovely. They're so lovely. I mean, and especially if you're playing variety music where you need sort of just this like excellent basic, like sort of modern jazz bass sound. They make P pickups.
It's like a jazz
well,
bass on steroids, isn't it?
They're fantastic. I just found that when I had a Sadowski, I wanted maybe just a little bit more mid-range character. I found that sometimes I would sort of get lost. Because that preamp is so lovely, boosting bass, boosting treble, and it feels great. And you do that, and then it kind of scoops out the middle. And I found that, like, wow, especially on recordings, I was always gravitating back toward something more simple and passive that had maybe a little bit more like mid-range character, that when you played it by itself, it didn't sound as good, as pretty, as polished, but it seemed to sort of like fit into a mix in a cool way. So I could never make a Sadowski instrument work for me, but I know there are plenty of people that do, and they're awesome. They're awesome basses.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting thing to talk about that bracket, the Oliva, the Sadowski, the Lull, the Nordstrand, I can't remember, there was somebody else in there, wasn't there? The Lackland. It's something I was thinking about recently is some of them have their own sound. Like I would say Sadowski has its own sound.
I totally agree. Yes.
Right. Which I dig. I kind of like dig that sort of like, there's the Sadowski sound. I dig that.
Yeah, it's like a thumbprint.
Yeah, the Oliva thing is like very traditional. Like he has one circuit. He does his own pickups. It's like he does his thing. That's the sound.
Yes.
And I think and when you look at Nordstrand, maybe Lull as well, they haven't got, I guess they haven't got their sound. They do a mix, don't they? So you can go to Lull and you can say, I want these pickups with this circuit, and and do that thing. And I think that I love the idea. I don't think I fall in love with that idea as much, even though the end sort of like product might be better. I just kind of like the idea of a particular bass manufacturer having a thumbprint, as you said, having a sound of their own. I kind of like get excited about that. Like I would say like MTD, even though they do a whole like mix of stuff, they've got like a sound. Or that is associated. It's associated anyway. I mean, that's a good call. You froze for a moment, so I wasn't quite sure. There was something that got lost. But you did too. I just kept talking.
That's a good call. I will say for the Lull thing, the thing that's closest to me. I mean, obviously, I'm going to say this right, but the Thunderbird pickups that they do, that to me is like. It's those pickups sound so cool, and it's their own version of like a Gibson thing, and it's that to me is sort of the closest like thumbprint. But yeah, I know what you mean, man. Like when there's a brand that gets associated with a very specific thing, it's cool, and even if it's not your thing, it's still cool.
Yes, like, even if it's not Dingwall, for instance, Dingwall, right?
Man, absolutely.
I don't want to play Dingwall. They're fan friend, the whole thing, and it's not my bag, right? But they're cool because they've got personality, they've got that thing. And from a consumer standpoint, I look at them, I'm like, and I can categorize it in my mind. Maybe it's just me being freaking stupid and human, right? I'm just like, I need to put this bass in a category,
in a box.
I need to put it in a box, and when they're not in a box, I get confused. And I also do believe that there's, and we've talked about this as well on the pod before, that I think there's when a manufacturer leans into a particular sound or a particular sound, particular mix of things, and it's kind of becomes their thing, I think it becomes easier for them to keep leveling that thing up, because they're doing the same thing. We've talked about F-Bass before, right? Saying that it's their pickups, it's their circuit, and all of the F-Basses I play have just got, they just say, not, there's differences between them, but the consistency is just like off the chart. And I do like that. I think that, and that I'm not taking away anything from any of the other manufacturers at all, because I've been talking to MTD recently, and it's been Daniel over at MTD, and that's been a really interesting conversation.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, it's been really cool, and those guys think in terms of tone packages that are like, what do they call them? There's a term that they use. It's like, it's not wood combination. It's like a tone package or something. I think I'm getting it wrong, but I was like, oh, these guys have gone really deep on this.
Deep.
Like deep.
Yeah,
They've gone
yes.
down the rabbit hole and might have even popped out the other side. And because Mike Tobias and Daniel Tobias, their I guess their IP, what they bring to it is this mixing different types of woods to create different aesthetics of sounds. That's their kind of like their approach, I would say. That's kind of like custom to them, and they seem to have done it to a greater extent than many of the other manufacturers, or at least put it up front, talk about it a lot. They're like, this is this wood combination, therefore X, Y, Z, right? But but definitely having that experience, speaking to Daniel over at MTD, I was like, oh, I could definitely make a mistake here. I could definitely make a mistake. And, you know, because it's not one thing. They're not selling one thing. They're selling, there's a selection of all of these different wood combinations. So I can listen to somebody playing an MTD, and if I get a different wood combination, I'm going to get a different sound. And I think that's, it's...
Dude, listen, you just need to fly over to New York. I'll meet you. We'll get a car. Let's go. We'll go up there. We'll hang out with MTD. We'll hang out with Spectre. There's a bunch of folks up there. We'll hang out with the Labella guys, Alinto. We'll hang out with Tony Levin lives up there.
We didn't mention
let's go,
Alinto.
man.
Oh, no. We didn't mention Alinto. Oh, my word.
Yeah, well,
that was a
Alinto,
crime against
to me,
Fender bass types. Yeah, they are like absolutely in that high bracket with those guys. They're amazing.
They live sort of like above. I almost didn't like Alinto lives so high up in the like boutique stratosphere to me, like sort of hand built. But good call. We didn't mention Alinto.
Oh my, Mitch, I apologize profusely. Oh, I hate myself now. Yeah. I've got an Alinto.
Part of it is that Jack has your Alinto, right?
Yeah, Jack's got my Alinto, and I'll say that my Alinto, of all of the Fender style instruments I've owned, that's the best one. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. It's so good. And Alinto, if you are wondering, they're a branch of Labella, which is a string manufacturer. And the basses are made by a legendary luthier called Mas Hino in New York. Ian, you've gone and hung out with them. And Mitch works there as well, who's a killer bass player. And they're just creating very like traditional Fender style instruments. They're not active, I don't think. I think they're all passive. But they're passive, just absolutely superb. Like superb.
Yeah. And they don't hit me. I mean, they are a very traditional passive option, but they don't hit me the same as like maybe Nash does, where it's just a Fender copy, like maybe, parts put together. And there's nothing wrong with buying parts and putting together a bass. A lot of manufacturers do that. But Alinto feels more considered. It's a super small team. The finishes are so cool. The way that they do their headstock, the way that they do their necks, how they wind pickups, how they think about circuits, like how they've done like a stack knob jazz circuit that is different than Fenders. It sets them apart from people that just do the straight up Fender thing, but put a different, brand name on the headstock.
They're definitely searching for their sound, right?
Yeah, for sure. Sure. And I mean, they're combining that with strings too, like the new flats that Alinto, Labella make are so cool that Mitch designed. I have them on a Lull 5-string that I'm playing right now, and it's just amazing. So good. Oh, they're really good. I've never had flats on a 5 before. Hey, let me ask you this though, just really quick. What if you don't want a Fender style thing? what are the other options? I think actually that's where the question came from.
Yeah, absolutely.
We spent
Yeah,
so long
absolutely.
giving you all these Fender, like what are the things that pop to your mind? Like, say I'm not buying a Harley Benton. I'm not buying a Fender. I'm not buying an Alinto. I'm not doing it. I want something different. First of all, my questions to you are, what are the things that pop to mind, and why would that be somebody's motivation?
The first thing that popped to mind for me is just soap bars. I'm just like, soap bar. When you said like not a Fender, my brain thinks, soap bars. Like that's the... So
you went MTD. You went Ken Smith MTD world in your mind.
MTD, Ken Smith, F-bass to a certain degree, except they are like a Fender Jazz in a shell suit, in a different body shape, right? A Fender Jazz,
yeah.
an F-bass. Where else did my mind go? Federa. Like most of these things that I'm saying are like soap bars, even though you get them because when I think about other boutique basses with jazz pickups in them, well, then it's just a jazz bass, but with a different body, in a way.
Yeah.
You know?
But you went modern, high-end. In your mind, you went modern, high-end, active sound. Yes.
Yeah.
In my mind, I go to all the other super, like, thumbprint passive things. So in my mind, I went to Rickenbacker, Hofner.
And was so passive, different for me and you. That's so interesting.
Yeah. And like Music Man Stingray. That's another one, Stingray, right? Like the Stingray is such an interesting, and it's so different than the classic Fender thing. But that's, to me, those are all the instruments. Like, I guess maybe those four. I guess like Stingray, Rickenbacker, Hofner, and then maybe some kind of hollow body, Guild Starfire. And then also, Thunderbird, Gibson. Those are very, very different, and those are all passive, and they're all sort of like vintage style passive instruments that are very different than Fender. And I just think it's really good to know, especially if you record, to know what those things do and to know what they're really well suited for. And Scott, I feel like you're coming from more of like a artist player perspective. Maybe I'm thinking about this more like a session dude, and you're thinking about it more like what you want. I think that you're giving him the answer.
Yeah, you're giving them the answer that they wanted. I think that like
maybe, I don't know.
Everybody's saying Fender, but like, what happens if it's not a Fender? And you're like, it's the obvious. When you said it was like, it's Rickenbacker, Hofner, like all of the standard ones that you. So, I think that is the correct answer. 10 points.
Well, I don't know if it's correct. I just think it is an answer. It's one of the answers. And I think there was a great producer named David Bendith who said to me long ago, if you endeavor to play other people's music, like if you're not just playing your own music, and you're going to be a gun for hire, you not only have to know and accept those other sounds in your stable, but you have to fall in love with them. So fall in love with how a P-bass sounds with flats, but also fall in love with the short scale Mustang or Hofner thing. Fall in love with a big long scale T-Bird with rounds through an Ampeg SVT emulator. Like actually, because those things are the useful things that you'll find that will come up time and time again on sessions that you play. But probably the main thing that you should have at the end of the day
is a Fender. There's no getting away from it. I was listening to this great video. There's a YouTuber. Well, he's not a YouTuber. Well, he's got some YouTube videos on YouTube, but I'm not sure that makes him a YouTuber. But he's got a lot. It's called Robiq. It's spelled Robiq. I think he might be from South Korea, and he's a killer bass player. And he's got this bass comparison video where he just plays all of these basses, and I was like listening to them all, and it was all of the Fender style sounds that sort of like jumped out to me, and I was like, oh, that's the vibe. I will say though, I've been having this weird realization recently, and maybe this is a different topic, but I'll just say it out loud. Just we both know about it, and then we can
say it.
Is that sometimes the sound I like listening to, like other people play, isn't the sound that I enjoy playing within the context of a band. And that is a really
100%.
Is that not the weirdest thing ever? Like to say,
it's so weird.
The sound that I enjoy listening to other people play isn't the sound that I enjoy playing.
Tell me how that lands for, like, give me an example, or give everybody an example of what that is, because I've got one too. But tell me what that means for you. What does that look like?
Yeah, so when I listened to that video, I'll get this just because I've just mentioned it. It's a really good example. All of the Fender style instruments were the ones where I was like, oh, that sounds mega. That sounds great. And they weren't all Fenders. They were just like, they sounded like they had that jazz flavor to them.
Like Fender adjacent.
So, and one of them that really stood out actually was this Federa. It was a Federa 5-string, but it just had 2 jazz pickups. And it just sounded killer, right? And on the video as well, that he was playing Ken Smith on one of the clips of this video. I was like, sounded okay. But I was like, but preferred the Fender, the sound of this Fender sounding bass and the other basses. But I know that if I played it, I would probably, because of my playing style, gravitate to the Ken Smith kind of sound more than the Fender.
Interesting.
I was like, it's so weird.
Wow, right.
What about you?
Because how you interface with an instrument is so connected to how it feels. It's never just about the sound, right? It's not, even though we say like, oh, the tone, but the experience of playing something is a big part of how you perceive your sound and how you sound on an instrument. I totally hear that. For me, some of the big classics that people love, when I hear them, I'm like, yeah. And then when I get them, I'm like, oh, I can't make this work. One of them is Stingrays. Like, I feel like Music Man Stingrays. And even though I've played them on videos for SBL, and I've almost never, I was asked to play one on a session. I told you that, like right after I sold mine to Blue to Tiger. Somebody's like, hey man, can you do that like Blood Sugar Sex Magic? I'm like, you kidding me? But I really struggle making a bridge. Here's what it is. I struggle making a bridge pickup sound work for me. And essentially, a Stingray is just like a giant humbucker bridge pickup sound. I hear other people on it. I feel that way about a lot of bridge pickups. Jocko's jazz bass sound. I hear it and I'm like, wow, obviously that's an amazing, unique thumbprint thing. But I don't like it when I play it. Like when I play bridge pickup jazz bass, I'm like, It doesn't work for me. So anything that's sort of that nasal forward thing, I really struggle to even choose it. I almost never, ever play it. There have been a couple of exceptions, like in the stuff that I've played for other people, but it's only when I'm aping somebody. I played this track for Eric Hutchinson, Happy Like a Chicken with His Head Cut Off. I've done that for SBL, and that was like bridge pickup jazz bass, because I was going for sort of like Bakiti Kumalo, a line that was kind of pokey. But man, that's what it is for me. I can't hang with bridge pickup sounds when I'm playing. When other people are playing, great. And then I go, man, I should get into that. And then I try it, I'm like, ugh, and I'm always rolling to the neck or using both pickups. Always. It's
so weird, isn't it? It's like, it kind of breaks it. Honestly, it broke my brain a bit. I was like, oh, like, what is that? Because it sounds great, but it's, I didn't really know what to take from it, other than it was a realization,
I want this to transition into talking a little bit about Scott's search for the sound, because you have been on a quest, my friend.
I am on a quest, man. Like, I will say that, it does transition into that. And it's kind of off the back of doing the album. It's like, I've been doing the album, we've been mixing the album, I'm listening to the album, and, you've been there before. It's like it can be a painful experience listening to that stuff over and over and over again. And I think that even though I'm really happy with the overall sound of the album, and I'm really stoked with the tunes and the performances and my own performance, I think everybody killed it. I'm happy with all of that.
Yeah.
I'm like 70% happy with my sound. I'm like,
really?
Yeah. Like maybe 75% happy. I'm like, oh, next time. So what was it? Like, what didn't work? What do I need to change?
What didn't work? What do you need to change? Exactly.
I don't know, man. And that's the search for the sound. It was a realization. It's an interesting thing, like listening back to it and then having that realization of, oh, maybe this isn't the sound that I'm searching for. Maybe it's something else. It's almost like sort of like painting a picture, and then standing back and looking at the colors and thinking,
yep.
Maybe I need a different palette of colors to express the art that I'm trying to express, right? The voice that I'm trying to bring. So it's kind of like that. I wasn't displeased with it. It was just I listened to it and I was like, I'm not sure that's the sound that I'm searching for in my mind. So, and again, it was just more of a realization. It was just more of a realization that I think there's more work to do around finding what that sound is. And honestly, I'm not sure what that sound is. There are people that I'm definitely inspired by the way they sound. I'll tell you what, another real big realization for me over the last few weeks is that you know what I'm like, man. I'm a shredder, right? I'm always like, I'm listening to people's solos and stuff like that. And I'm not going to mention any names, but some of my favorite players, I've realized, not everybody, but some of them, I love their soloing sound, but when that sound goes into the mix, I'm like, don't like it now.
Interesting.
And I've not really listened to it in that kind of like granular detail before. I'm like, oh, I love that part of their sound, but as they gravitate into the mix and just playing as a part in the band, I'm not sort of like into that sound that they've got. Like some players, it doesn't make a difference. It's like great when they're soloing, great when they're comping in the, just like grooving in the band. But some of them, when it gets into the band, it just, there's no clarity. It kind of just, there's not enough top end for me to actually hear. So, and like a common thing that people have been doing recently is they'll dial the tone down. So they've got like a very, like there's no top end on the, there's no top end on the solo sound. And in the solo, it sounds really great because it's like above, it's sitting above in the mix. But sometimes when that disappears back in, because there's no top end, you just can't hear the bass. It's like, it becomes almost, it's just, you can't grasp onto,
like you lose it a little.
You can't really hear the intricacies in the line that you want to hear. So I've been thinking about that a lot, about how I can get a great solo sound. Like, what is the solo sound? What is the in the band sound? And I guess like a Venn diagram, right? What's the solo sound? What's the in the mix sound, like in the band? But also, what's the sound that suits me as a player, so I can execute the lines I want to be able to play? Because of you, to your earlier point, when you listen to that bridge pickup and you play, you're like, oh, like this feels weird. I love listening to it, but it doesn't feel comfortable playing.
Right.
Well, I am the same. Like there's certain tonal colors that you can bring into your sound that doesn't feel that comfortable for me to play on for whatever reason. And so I'm just, and again, it's more, this is just sort of like a realization at the minute, is that I've just got work to do in that area and figuring out what it is for me. It's a bit of a rabbit hole, man.
Well, and hey, I just want to speak to the editorial like everybody listening to this, like you should also be thinking about your sound. Everybody. It makes me feel like, gosh, is my sound, like, I love, this is actually really inspiring to me, Scott. And it's probably really frustrating to you because you're like, God damn it. You didn't hit the target 100%. And you know what, dude, you may never. And what I think is beautiful about it is the search, right?
Yes.
Like you'll find something on the next record, you'll dial in something and maybe you'll be 80%, but you're never going to be 100%. And you know what? Good. Because if you're ever 100% satisfied, that just means that you're not growing. You don't care. If you're like, yep, I love my tone 100%. Oh, when I hear myself play, I love it. I could listen to it all. Like if you're there, well then just hang it up. Go be a banker. You should always be striving. There should always be some level of striving. And I'm just going to bring it back to this real quick. You know what it might be on the next one?
What do you think?
P-bass.
P-bass. I don't know. I don't think so, man. I don't think it's going to be the P. Isn't it weird?
Has Scott Divine abandoned the P-bass?
I've not abandoned the
abandoned.
Dude, I love the P-bass. I love the way it just doesn't suit the music that I'm playing at the minute. That's the thing. It would it just wouldn't work in the mix. It would just be like it'd be like just impossible for the
tugboat on a racetrack, dude.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, tractor on a racetrack. Yeah, you know.
Yeah,
I love the sound of a P-bass. I really do, and I think that
I have to push back on it a minute.
I love the way that it makes me play as well. I just love the way it makes me play. But I just think in this particular sonic space that I'm in at the minute with the music that I'm playing and making, it just won't work. So, and also I'm listening to a lot of players that are playing this style of music that I'm doing at the minute, or, you know, in and around that. And I don't, maybe I'm not saying like,
listen,
it could be fun to explore.
I remember when you went to the P-bass and I thought, whoa, Fusion dude on the P-bass. And it was interesting. And I know why you did it. We've talked about it a lot, but a recap, you saw all these guys playing these fancy high C5s and active. And you're like, I want to stand out. I want to be different. And you did a thing on the P-bass. And I just, for what it's worth, was really compelled by that. And I don't want you to lose sight of that thing. I don't want you to lose sight of it. Now, if the bass is a modern thing, if it's a Ken Smith, if it's an MTD, great. I want you to find the thing that you're happy with. But I also want to say it might be hiding in plain sight, and it might be a thing that you have never considered. Like that you think this is never going to work. And I remember hearing you play a Rickenbacker and thinking, holy shit, that is a cool sound. I freaking
love Rickenbackers. Yeah.
I know. And their bridge pickup sound is incredible. And
it is.
I know it's not the right thing, and I know, you know, 5-string, I know, but I just want to put it out there as your friend, as your brother from an American mother. I want you to consider some things that you would never consider.
Yeah,
that's all I got.
No, man, it's good, and I think that here's the weird thing. Like, I think if I'd done it on a P-bass, I'd know exactly what sound to dial in as well from a mix perspective. I think it's easier. I think it's more complex with other basses.
Totally.
Oh man, I'm up for it. It's such a rabbit hole, isn't it? It's such a rabbit hole. Yeah, and then mixing, that's where I've definitely felt pain, where I really needed to be more experienced this time round. I was like relying on, we've got a great engineer, that's great, but I am not knowledgeable enough to be, you know, like when you want to be able to communicate in a certain way. And there's been this realization of, I need to be more knowledgeable in this area to really help him craft that sound, and like, how do we EQ it? What are we doing? Like, it's not in my wheelhouse. I can, bass EQ is one thing, but then putting that in a mix and, you know, and knowing how to dial that in within a mix is a different skill set. So it's something that's also I've been thinking about as well. Then to your point, I think that it is really interesting to think about what is your sound that you're trying to, you know, for everybody listening, what is your sound that you're trying to create on your instrument? Like, it's cool to have these different basses that we play, and, you know, obviously session players do that as well. But it's also really great to have a sound of your own that you can develop over time, and then you can really learn about, and it becomes part of your voice on the instrument. And I think that, like, you've absolutely got that. Even though you play all of these different basses and different sounds, you've absolutely got that. You know, I think for me, when I hear you on a jazz bass, that's really it. I'm like, that is where you're super... just sounds like you know. You've probably played a jazz bass more than any other bass. And that's right. You really understand all of the little tiny intricacies within that sound, and specifically how your technique interacts with that sound. How your body and your technique really interacts with that sound, and how you can bring out different dynamics within that sound, because it is different for different basses. And I think that's there's kind of gold there. Yeah. Just as we're just on the conversation of technique, just to give everybody a heads up, the Technique Accelerator, which is my program where you get to study with me for 6 months, all about technique, is opening next week. We only open it once a year, and it is coming. So if you're interested, check it out. You'll be getting an email about it if you're on the email list. If not, head over to Scott's Bass Lessons and jump on that email list, because again, we only open it once a year, and like, technique really is the foundation to, you know, your playing. Is your great technique isn't just about playing fast. Playing fast is facilitated by your technique for sure, but great technique is about your sound, your dynamics on the instrument, how you move around the neck, how you like manipulate notes, how like it's everything. And there's so many players that hit that roadblock, and they're wondering, they've hit this roadblock because they need to learn a new scale, or they need to learn a new arpeggio, and a lot of it actually can be just dialed right back to your technique, you know. And people, it's a real thing, you know. It really is.
Dude, I've thought about it so much since you've said it, you know, because we've had these debates of like, you know, what's the most important thing? And, you know, and I'm like a time guy. I think time. And you're like, yeah, but, you know, your time is sort of predicated on your technique that you can play.
And I'm like, people's technique gets in the way of their time. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my mind is like...
Can we have the three T's? Technique, time, and the other one would be vocabulary.
Tone?
But tone, time, technique, and tone. But like, well, no. Because
I know.
Tone's kind of
missing?
part of your technique.
Yeah.
But hey,
you're right. You're right. You're totally right.
A shot.
It's like, no. It's like, Scott, no, we can have the one T technique. You know, it's like, no. There's one T, the capital T. Well, but I mean, I really I do think that it is possible. I will say this. I think it's possible to have great technique and then still have things that you're working on. I don't think it's the end all and be all. Right. Yeah. I mean, obviously, then you need vocabulary, like you say. Obviously, you still have to work on time. Obviously, you still have to work on different styles. But I am coming around, dude, to this idea that technique is absolutely crucial, and that we need to talk about it, and that we need to work on it, and that we need to study it. I've sort of taken it for granted for a long time. But then when I have been with you, and like we were working on those Anthony Jackson bass lines, for instance, there's just some stuff that I just couldn't play. I was like, I can't play this. Like I would need to sit down for quite a while and like work this out. And it wasn't because I'm not good. It's just that I don't have the technique and fluidity in some of those lines to make it work. And I'm like, And I saw it, and it wasn't about time. You know, and I was like, I would just need to really, really focus on getting a technique to facilitate some of those lines, some of those faster things that I couldn't do.
Some of them lines are awful,
it wasn't about timekeeping.
Those Anthony Jackson
brutal.
lines, they're brutal,
Just brutal. And
I think
so
that
I want to take this too, man.
It's more dialed in on other instruments. Like I learned classical guitar. I learned guitar, and then my kids are learning piano. Like, it's more dialed in on those instruments more so than bass. It's interesting that with those
totally
instruments, it's very sort of like, there's kind of like a technique, I guess, playbook, a curriculum that people follow that is kind of like really rigid, especially like piano, like seeing those like pianists and the way that they work those sort of like, there's exercises, the hand exercises, and the fluidity of and how they have to have their arms and the fluidity and stuff like that. It's very dialed in. It's very formulaic. There's like specific ways that people seem to do it, right? On bass, it's more lax, and I think it's because when we start out, it's kind of simple. We're playing some simple stuff. You know,
one note at a time.
Exactly. We can kind of get away with it. So I think that what happens is it's a little more lax and less kind of formulaic in terms of where we are educationally right now on the instrument, and that cuts people off at the knees later down the line when they want to learn a new bit of vocabulary, and then they're like, oh, I just can't play it. Why can't I? I'm obviously not. I'm just not good enough. Well, it just might be a technique. Yeah,
dude, and I found that to be 100% the case. And I am never in an instance in my professional career, other than being with you, where I'm asked to play crazy lines, because I've just cultivated a different thing. And so I've been like, nah, whatever, technique, whatever. And then when the chips are down and you're like, hey man, let's lock this up and play this lick together. And I was like, oh, Jesus, dear God. I mean, so I saw it for me very specifically, like, oh, I can't do this because I have not prioritized the time on my technique to make this comfortable. And so kudos to you, man. I think it's really a cool program, and I want to take it too. So
cool, man. Hey, there's some big bass players. I'm not going to say their names, but there's some big bass players taking that. Did I tell you the big one that took the course?
I don't think you did. Can you tell me offline?
Yeah. Well, yeah, like we saw him like enroll, and I was like, oh, yeah, you've spoken to him. Yeah.
I have?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Oh man.
When I saw, it was like
I can't wait.
It was like a uh-oh kind of moment when they signed up. I was like, oh shit. But yeah, it was great, you know.
Wow, man. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, tell me when we're off the pod. Yeah, let's call it.
Let's call it.
You guys, thank you.
Yeah.
This is so fun. This is so fun. I just want to say that it's good to see you again. It's good to be with all of you again. We love doing this podcast. Thank you for listening. If you would be so kind as to leave us an excellent rating wherever you listen to the pod. And if you're watching on YouTube, hey, comment, subscribe. You know I'm going to do that YouTuber thing. Look to see if you're subscribed. Are you? Oh, let's get on that train. Let's get on that subscribe train. It's going to be good. We've got so many more episodes coming down the pike, so stick with us. It's going to be a blast. We love you very much. And that's it for me. How about you, Scott?
Yeah, that's it from me. I'm just such a child. I was going to end it by saying meat diet. That was going to be it. Anyway, yes, that was going to be it. Yeah, meat diet. Okay, dudes, we'll see you next time. Take it easy. Bye.
Take care, everybody.